Welcome to the Travel Squad podcast, where adventure meets inspiration. We're your hosts. I'm Brittany.
I'm Kim.
And I'm Jamal. Together, we explore international destinations, hike epic national parks, and share unforgettable travel experiences with you, one passport stamp at a time.
Our mission is to inspire you to travel by showing you how you can make it work no matter your budget, schedule, or experience level.
We bring you along so that you can laugh, get excited, and start planning your own trip.
So grab your ticket and your passport.
And don't forget your travel insurance.
And get ready to embark on a new adventure with us around the globe. Hello, fellow travelers.
Hey, squaddies.
Hey, squaddies.
Welcome to this week's episode of the Travel Squad podcast. Today, we have two very special guests joining us, Melissa and Scott, the hosts of the Sunshine Travelers podcast.
In this episode, we talk with Scott and Melissa about their extensive knowledge of the Caribbean. Being that they live in Eastern Florida and are so close to this region, they have traveled to a lot of the countries and islands in the Caribbean and share with us their tips and best recommendations for traveling through this part of the world.
One thing I really loved about this interview was learning about how they travel and hearing about the local experiences that they try to get out of every destination they go to. They're touring with local small businesses, going to local walking food tours in these hole-in-the-wall places, and they really take the time to learn about the culture and immerse themselves in it. They're not just going to like the flashy commercial places of the world, and I think that makes such a difference in this interview, but also in their podcast, Sunshine Travelers podcast. It makes them really special and unlike other podcasts that are out there, so I'm really excited to share it with you, squaddies. We were on their podcast too, so you can go over there and listen to that. But with that, let's bring Melissa and Scott onto the Travel Squad podcast.
With Amex Platinum,
welcome to the Centurion Lounge.
You get access to the Centurion Lounge, so the sounds of vacation start before you get there. That's the powerful backing of American Express. Terms apply. Learn more at americanexpress.com/withAmex.
Your teen requested a ride, but this time not from you. It's through their Uber teen account. You drive your teenager around, a lot, to their friend Jacob's house, their other friend Jake's house, to James's, to Jaden's, to Jalen's, to...
Mom, this is Jake's house, not Jacob's.
Now with an Uber teen account, your teen can request a ride under your supervision. They'll ride with a highly rated driver, and with live trip tracking, you'll follow along the whole ride to their friends' houses that all sound the same. Add your teen to your Uber account today. See app for details.
Bye, Mom.
Ryan Reynolds here for, I guess, my 100th Mint commercial. No, don't. I mean, honestly, when I started this, I thought I only have to do like 4 of these. I mean, it's unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month. How are there still people paying 2 or 3 times that much? I'm sorry, I shouldn't be victim blaming here. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/save. Whenever you're ready.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See details.
Scott and Melissa, welcome to the show.
Thank you. We're excited to be here and chat with you guys.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
We're excited to have you on. It's been a couple months since we chatted with you all and we're on your show. And we're really excited because you two are a married couple. Together, you run the Sunshine Travelers podcast. And we're going to get a lot more into that, into your podcast and the two of you. But we like to start all of our guest interviews by going way, way back. And since you are a married couple, I want to ask, what is your first travel memory that the two of you did together that really ignited your passion for traveling together?
That's an interesting question. If we go way, way back, early on, we did a lot of camping. So we didn't have a lot of money for travel, and we had a tent, and we would just pack that thing up and head off for the weekend and do a lot of camping, things of that nature. And one year we did the Blue Ridge Parkway. So we started up in Virginia and then camped our way back down. You know, we always enjoyed that. We don't go camping at all now, but I would say that that was probably some of our earliest travel experiences was camping.
I feel like that's a really great way to like camp and explore for cheap and travel for cheap. Jamal and I kind of did the same thing when we were young. Like we would do a lot of beach camping because we lived in California, kind of near the coast. But it's a great way to travel for cheap and like really get to know each other because you can't escape that tent, right?
Yeah, that's true. And I think it's harder so many more people camp. I think it's harder to just like pick up and go now camping without like making reservations and really planning ahead. But back then, we literally would decide on a Friday afternoon, hey, let's go camping this weekend. And I think that even the weekend before the Blue Ridge Parkway trip he's talking about, we went down to Savannah and just camped because you could just, find activities. We would typically stay, in state parks and hike and, just find everything that there was to do for the weekend without a lot of planning.
So camping was the spark, but just quick question, what was the fuel to take it to larger vacations? Like what was the next one up that was like, all right, now we're really going to explore, go international, do things like that?
That started many years later when our kids were younger. I chose not to have jobs where I traveled a lot. But as they got older, I took on new jobs at companies that were global. So I had an opportunity to travel to all over the world. And, as I would go, I would come back and tell Melissa about these different places I went. And most of that was just your typical work travel. You fly in, you go to the hotel, go to an office, maybe grab some dinner, and then repeat the cycle again. Didn't see a lot of sights. And then as our kids got older, Melissa started traveling with me some. And we loved to tell the story about one company. We had an office in New York and it had moved. And I told her, I said, you can come with me, but I'm just going to tell you, the office is in the middle of nowhere. And you're going to have to take a train or a taxi or something to just get to anything. And when we got there, she like smacked me upside the head and was like, you're an idiot. She's like, literally 3 blocks away is Times Square. She's like, what do you mean you're in the middle of nowhere? But it was my experience because I walked from the hotel to the office and I passed nothing.
Yeah. So I had to teach him how like you look on Google Maps and then you like zoom it out and you like see, what is around you. So I still get onto him about that. But I think backing up, he didn't mention growing up, he went to Germany a whole lot. His brother was a German exchange student, and then they just stayed in contact with the family. His mom also worked for Delta Airlines, and so they were able to literally just hop on a plane. And so they would do that a lot for weekends, but he had traveled to Germany a whole lot. And so actually my first international trip, we had been married a couple of years or so, and our daughter was like 1, and we decided to go visit that family in Germany as well. So that was actually, I got my passport, we got her passport. That was actually my first international trip, was going to visit them in Germany as well.
But then I would say the true wanderlust in us, the desire to get out and travel all the time like we want to do now, not to be tied down in any way and just be free to go at any time. That started about 5 years ago. And I had an opportunity in between jobs to take some time off. And we packed our bags and headed to Europe for 6 weeks. And that right there just kind of set off that true wanderlust inside of us of we want to do more of this. I think that was really the start of it and what initiated everything.
It's on my bucket list to do a long 1 or 2 month trip in Europe like that. That's really cool.
Yeah, because it's really amazing because you really can see so many different places because everything is so close and flights are so cheap. And, so we just kind of picked out a variety of activities, Mediterranean cruise, then we spent some time in Italy, then we went to Greece. We'd actually been invited to a friend's wedding, which was in the UK. So just we had like a huge variety of things that within a 6-week period, that we could see and still have time to relax and just chill out too.
Well, we'll have to have you back on just to talk about Europe because we really wanted to have you on to talk about the Caribbean. You two, in my eyes, are the experts on the Caribbean. You live in Amelia Island, Florida. And so last time we chatted, you said being in that location makes it really easy to get over to the Caribbean. And I've been listening to some of your episodes on different Caribbean locations. I haven't done a whole lot in the Caribbean. Britt and Jamal, you've done a little bit as well, but not a whole lot, right?
Yeah, and what we've done mostly has been cruises. We haven't had the opportunity to go to some of the Caribbean islands on their own solo. So we probably have very different experiences. So we can't wait to dive into some of that and talk about that.
Yeah, the only place in the Caribbean that we've been to, we took a direct flight and spent time exclusively there and not on a cruise, was the U.S. Virgin Islands, which we absolutely loved too. But everywhere else has only been on cruises. And you know that when you go on cruises, you're at port for maybe 6 to 10 hours. So you get a little taste of it, but you don't really get to delve into it deep and enjoy a lot of the culture of the islands too. So we're really excited to hear all about your guys' experience on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll share a little bit more about that in a second as we get into it.
We want to know everything. Most underrated, most overrated, best food, best beaches. Well, what is your favorite Caribbean island?
I think it has to be St. John.
Yeah.
In the U.S. Virgin Islands. And that's a place that we've been to a couple of times because we like to snorkel. And we've never found snorkeling quite to the level that you see in St. John. And so it just has always been one of those places that we keep wanting to go back to over and over again.
And that's an easy one too, right? You don't need a passport.
You need no passport.
The other thing about St. John is that as far as amount of accommodations, there's just not a whole lot. And so you're just not going to have crowds and crowds of people. I do think that sometimes when people are on the cruise ship, it may dock in St. Thomas and people will do some snorkel tours and stuff like that to St. John. And it's funny because those snorkel tours end up in the same little bays that you can drive to and, just snorkel off the beach. And so I think that's what we enjoy about it. It really is not crowded. And we just like to rent a car and just go beach hopping and snorkel until we are completely exhausted.
We loved St. John. We actually did some snorkeling too. And I love that there's a national park on St. John. Mm-hmm. And when we went, it was during COVID. So there wasn't a lot of crowds. There was no cruise ships coming into port. And it was amazing because we saw a few different turtles and we actually got to see up close a turtle eat a jellyfish while we were snorkeling. And
oh, wow.
It was such an amazing experience.
Wow. Yeah. So the sea turtles, I think that when you get to snorkel with sea turtles, not in a situation where they're like enticing them to be around you, they're just doing their own thing. Like to me, that is just one of the most amazing things, like just so relaxing. So number 2 then, and this was somewhere that we actually visited earlier this year, I would say is Curacao.
Yeah,
so
Curacao.
I don't hear much about.
Way underrated, I think. But before we go to Curacao, can we stay on the without a passport for just a minute?
Yeah.
Because there are really some very underrated Caribbean locations that don't require a passport. So if any of your listeners want to go somewhere and maybe they don't have a passport or, it's expired or whatever the reason is, Puerto Rico has absolutely stolen our heart as well.
You all were recently there, weren't you?
We were. And that was actually our second trip. The first time we went, we were going to St. John for the second time, and I had messed up and just not bought the flights ahead of time. So it can be pretty expensive to fly to St. Thomas. And I guess we should back up. If you want to go to St. John, you're not going to fly on to St. John. You have to fly to St. Thomas and then take a ferry boat or one of the hotel boats, depending on where you're staying, over to St. John. So that's probably important for people to know. So I had messed up and not bought the tickets, and Puerto Rico is super close. So I actually realized that JetBlue flies directly from Puerto Rico over to St. Thomas so we could get to St. John for fairly inexpensive. So we actually did like a round trip to Puerto Rico and then added that on for a whole lot more reasonable. And
that's a really good hack.
Yeah. So of course he was like, okay, sure. Sure. Extend our trip from like a 4 or 5 day trip to the whole week. And he did have to. And I guess that was the other reason that we didn't talk about a few things that we did. He did have to work a little bit, right? So we had to be a little bit closer to the hotel, but we still had the weekend. We did some things like they have a national forest with a lot of waterfalls you can go to. We did stay on the beach that time. We stayed close to Old San Juan, which is a really neat city. I think it's underrated because people think, oh, the cruise ships go into it. We don't want to go to a cruise ship port. But I feel like it's very different from other cruise ship port. There's a fort you can go to, but lots of great restaurants, a lot of culture there. So we recently revisited Puerto Rico as part of a travel creator conference. And so we were there for a whole week. This time we actually got to do some things like some tours. So we actually did a walking food tour in Old San Juan, which is right up our alley. We love finding hidden gem restaurants and then having people tell us about things. And what was funny about that is we went to 4 places that we had never even noticed and locals that I had asked, what are some recommendations? Weren't even on the radar. We got to do a tour for somebody with a whole day for the whole West Side. So highly recommend Puerto Rico. It has some really great beaches. We actually want to go back again. We want to do some other places like the island of Vieques and Cuba Libre. I don't think it's Cuba Libre. I think that's the drink, but something like that. But it's closer to those little islands, or like closer to St. Thomas, St. John. So they have like more of that feel and that kind of water. But just the people there are so friendly. And so I think that's probably the key to Puerto Rico is to book some tours and be with
And
some
what
locals.
company do you use to book your tours?
We'll have to share that with you so that you can share that with people, because we actually met with a lot of local companies. Puerto Rico, they tend to be local operators. And I do think that some of them are on some of these booking sites, but a lot of them are just like, reach out to us directly. They're small family-owned businesses and they book through their website and stuff like that, which is interesting. But the food tour was the Spoon Experience. They are on Instagram. Fantastic. I think that was the best food tour experience that we have ever done.
And so 2 of your favorite islands have been ones that you can get to without a passport. Are there any other Caribbean islands that you would recommend for listeners that don't require a passport?
St. Thomas is another one. We haven't really spent any time there because we were always, getting to St. John. But that's another one that I think is very popular. It is bigger than St. John, a lot more hotels. Of course, it does have, the cruise ports and stuff like that. But a lot of people like that too. We can't speak to that experience directly. But I will say, if you are a foodie, St. Thomas and especially St. John are probably not going to be your favorite places because there's just not a lot of, restaurants. I think it's more for, like you mentioned, the national park, some hiking, if it's not too hot, the swimming and things
Or for
like
nature.
Yeah, more for the nature. I mean, don't get us wrong, there's places to eat, so you're not going to starve when you go there, but it's not that unique culinary experience that you may be looking for if you're a foodie traveler.
What's up?
Before you board your flight, where'd we get that incredible gnocchi?
Hold up. Did you just call gnocchi gnocchi?
No. You're at the airport. No way you can hear me.
Actually, with my new Galaxy Buds 3 Pro from Samsung, I can hear everything.
Now boarding.
Gotta go. I'll bring you back some gnocchi.
Tune into what matters using Adaptive Active Noise Cancellation with Galaxy AI. Get Buds 3 Pro now at Samsung.com. Galaxy AI features require compatible Samsung Galaxy phone and initial setup via Samsung Wear app.
Earning your degree online doesn't mean you have to go about it alone. At Capella University, we're here to support you when you're ready. From enrollment counselors who get to know you and your goals, to academic coaches who can help you form a plan to stay on track. We care about your success and are dedicated to helping you pursue your goals. Going back to school is a big step, but having support at every step of your academic journey can make a big difference. Imagine your future differently at capella.edu.
My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/results to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
You had mentioned earlier that Curacao, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, because I've always seen it on a map and I never knew how to pronounce it, and you said it, but you said it's underrated. Tell us why it's underrated and people should go there.
It's very natural. And so usually when you talk about Curacao, you have Aruba, Bonaire, and Curacao, the ABC islands. And if you've ever been to Aruba, you quickly find out that when you get there, I call it Panama City, Florida, right? It's got all of these places like Olive Garden and Longhorn Steakhouse and, things like that. And don't get me wrong, if you like the beach and you just want to go and spend your time at a beautiful beach, that's Aruba.
I've also heard in Aruba, they have a beach where there's all these big pink flamingos and you can go and see them, feed them. And that's the only thing I know about Aruba. And that's the only reason I want to go. Did you see that?
There is, and we actually did go do that. So since you mentioned that, we'll mention that, and because we do have a couple of tips. So that particular beach is actually owned by the hotel. It's the Renaissance Aruba. I think it has another name in there. And so the only way that you can go to that island where those flamingos are is to either stay the night or what we found out later, well, 2 other ways. You can book a spa appointment and have access to that for the day because the spa is actually over on the island, or you can buy a day pass. The thing about the day passes, though, they are limited in quantity, and I think you can only buy like the day before. And so I was just like, I don't even want to hassle with that because if we want to kind of plan our schedule and stuff like that. So we actually ended up using points to book one night at that hotel to have access. We only ended up going the one day, but you could actually have access the day you check in and the day you check out. So that was a neat experience. Now, I think a lot of what you see on that is people having the Instagram pictures, right? And they have to take pictures with them, but you obviously don't have any control over where they go. There's two sides to that too. There's an adults only, and then there's one that's family friendly. And of course, those flamingos are free to go on either one. By the time kind of we got there that next morning, they were already kind of like grumpy, right? The kids had fed them and they were kind of like, get away from me. But later in the afternoon, we were able to kind of like walk in the water. I mean, that wasn't really our goal to take pictures with them and stuff like that. But it was neat. That was something that I wanted to do. And I said, I don't know if Aruba is a place that we'll ever go back to, right? We don't know until we go. If it's like, okay, we really want to go back here. So I said, let's plan to do this, because we did have 2 or 3 people who said, oh, you need to do this. This is a great experience to do that. So yes.
I do want to go back to Curacao though, because Aruba was very commercialized, if you will. And that's why I said it just looked like a beach in Florida or something like that you may go to. But Curacao, on the other hand, was much more authentic, I think, and has not been changed, has not been commercialized as much. And so you're going to find a lot more local culture there and, more authentic experiences than you will in Aruba.
And what brought you to Curacao? Did you go on your own, or was it a cruise ship stop?
We did it on our own. We were going to Aruba. So we had planned to stay like 4 or 5 nights in Aruba. And again, I said, oh, well, while we're there, we're so close to, so yeah, I have a habit of doing this, okay? So while we're there, we're so close to Curacao, let's do that. And actually, here's another hack for you, is it's cheaper to fly to Curacao. Well, it was for us. We did Delta from Atlanta, from Jacksonville, but then through Atlanta. It was way cheaper for Curacao than Aruba. And then they have a little bitty flight, which to us, some people are like, no way, I'm not getting on the little bitty plane. Those are fun for us, very inexpensive. We could fly over to Aruba, and then we actually flew back, because getting out of Aruba, flying back to the U.S. can be like hours and hours of standing in line and customs, immigration, security, stuff like that. And we had heard that. So that was the route we took, and it actually ended up saving us money. So that was why we went. I think I had seen it online and on social media, and it has a very neat Willemstad. Willemstad is the town. Cruise ships do go into that. They kind of park. It's a good walk for people to go into the town. And so I think a lot of people do like excursions on Curacao, but it's got a European feel. Part of the Dutch Antilles, same as Aruba, but it really does have a bigger Dutch feel without feeling like a cruise port as much. They do have some of those shops, but like in the evenings, since we're not on a cruise, right, we have those restaurants. They have this famous bridge that they light up. They have like a fort that's now turned into all these restaurants. So being there at night, not on the cruise ship, we just had almost like a European feel, the restaurants that then bring out all the chairs out onto the sidewalk, and they come out and serve meals. But then during the day, again, we love to snorkel. So we sought out these beaches that you can go snorkel at. There's a national park you can go to and see the different, the blowholes and stuff like that. So one side of the island is swimmable, and then the other side has like the really high surf that you can't swim on.
But you'll see a lot of people out there kite surfing, which is really cool as well.
Yeah.
Sounds like best of both worlds, Europe and tropical.
Yeah, so we really enjoyed that. I had a feeling that when we were researching going to those 2 places, and then I know people love Aruba. Like there are people who go to Aruba every single year and absolutely love it. I mean, don't get me wrong, it has some of the long beaches, Palm Beach and Eagle Beach, and we did find some good snorkeling there as well, but just the feel and like I said, Curacao being more rustic. And here's the thing, is I had read there's a couple of places where you can actually see the flamingos possibly in the wild, in the salt flats on Curacao. Ooh. And we did see that as well. So, you don't get as close to them, right? But then you're thinking kind of the same as I mentioned with the turtles. They're in the wild versus being, their wings are clipped and they can't leave and stuff like that.
And the same for Bonaire. We didn't end up going to Bonaire. It was going to be pretty expensive and we weren't going to have a lot of time to do it. But we have heard that there's a large natural flamingo population on Bonaire. And so a lot of people like to do that. It's the ABC Islands.
Yes, ABC. That's going on my bucket list.
And also, and all of those three places are popular for diving. I'd say especially Curacao and then especially Bonaire. A lot of people go there. So if people like to dive, that's a place that, is really good for diving. And I do want to mention, I know we said not as commercialized, stuff like that. There is a sandals resort on Curacao that has recently opened. So if that's your thing, you could go. But in that case, you're really not going to leave the resort probably because everything's included, that kind of thing. And we just enjoyed, we rented a car. We went all over. We did the nature things. There's the Blue Curacao, the liqueur. There's a distillery there. And so you get to go see that. So we did a cocktail class there. And, and so that's just one of the excursions. We met some people that were on the cruise. It's one of the excursions that you can do on Curacao. So we really enjoyed that. Like we were almost sad to leave.
Let me say one more thing about Curacao. There is a shipwreck right off of the shoreline from snorkeling. You can see this old tugboat down under the crystal clear water. It's like 40 feet down or something like that. And all the amazing fish swimming around this tugboat. And that is a really unique experience you shouldn't miss. However, an interesting story is there was an oil rig that they had brought into the port and that they were refurbishing while we were there. And so literally you had to get in the water behind this giant oil rig. And so you're like, is this the right place? And matter of fact, the first time we went, we were like, we don't think we're in the right place. And so we didn't see the shipwreck. And then we decided to go back out again and try it one more time. And this time there were people swimming around it. And we were like, that's where it's at. And it was a really neat experience.
Yeah, Marriott Beach, you're just like, this is strange. But there's actually a beach club there too. Not anything fancy, but chairs and a little restaurant and things like that. But if you Google on Google Maps, Tugboat Beach, it'll come up easy and you can find it. But yeah, probably our very favorite snorkel place on Curacao. That was very neat. So many fish.
Well, I'm going to have to add that to my list. And Curacao just went up on my list quite a bit. I'm like, Jamal, when can we fit that in next?
Well, I'm excited. We're going to have to add it to the list. Everywhere is on the list, but even though everywhere is on the list, I want to also hear where's the most overrated in the Caribbean, in your opinion. We're still going to go, but I just want to know what you think about that. What would you say is overrated?
I'm going to say the Bahamas.
Bahamas.
Yeah, I think a lot of people go to the Bahamas and they never even leave the cruise port. But I do want to say one last thing about ABC is it's below the hurricane belt. So since we're right in the middle of hurricane season, if you're looking for a Caribbean destination, you can make those plans because they aren't impacted by hurricanes.
Yeah, so that is important, right? Because you do have to think about for the Caribbean hurricane season.
Let's go back to the overrated question.
So talk about the Bahamas. I think you would say specifically, though, Nassau, right? A lot of people go to Nassau, and that's their experience, probably with the Bahamas. I think you would have a completely different experience in the Bahamas if you went to a smaller island or you were doing it like on a catamaran trip or something like that. I think that would be a completely different experience. Like I would compare that to going to Greece and only going to these places that are super popular and stuff like that. So a couple of, I guess, tips about if you go to the Bahamas, we actually did a walking tour with a local for a few hours that was very informative. She was fantastic. I mean, there's not a ton of things to see in Nassau, but she took us around, but really gave us a perspective, not just of historical, but what it really is like to be Bohemian and like their history and, what it's like to be there today and stuff like that. And then you would still have time to see the beach for a little while if you did it as part of a cruise, ship. That would be for a few hours in the morning. You could grab lunch. The other thing I would say about Nassau is just getting off the beaten path and going to, what was the name of that place where all the restaurants are? The
Fish Fry.
The Fish Fry, which is a bunch of restaurants. And I mean, that was fantastic.
I was about to ask if you guys, when the Bahamas and Nassau particularly, went to the Fish Fry, because when we were there, we did. And we ate some delicious conch fritters that Brittany and I still talk about to this day. And they were absolutely dynamite.
Yeah, cracked conch is definitely one of the things that you can't go to the Bahamas and not try, as well as their whole fish. They're known for their whole red snapper. Matter of fact, a lot of the restaurants that you go in, they have the fish there, and you can pick out which one of the fish you want, and then they fry that up. It's a very light fry, so it's not like real greasy or whatever, but that's the other thing that I think that they're very well known for. And don't forget to eat at the poop deck.
What's the poop deck?
Yeah, so poop deck is actually a nautical term, but the restaurant there, that was probably one of the nicer restaurants that we went to. And the reason I say it's overrated is because that was a very expensive restaurant, even compared to, we live on an island. We live on a destination place. And that poop deck restaurant was extremely expensive, but it wasn't like it was a 5-star dining experience. But I would say it's probably somewhere in the neighborhood of $60 to $70 per person to eat there.
Okay. Yeah. So I think a lot of people's experience with Bahamas is that, and then go into some of these private islands, right, from the cruise ship, which is just enjoying the beach for the day. So I think probably for the Bahamas, something that would be on our bucket list to do is to do, like I mentioned, do some kind of sailing trip or catamaran trip or something like that, so that you could kind of go around and then see some different places.
So I think you're either going to come in on a cruise or you're going to go with the purpose of going to Atlantis. Mm-hmm. Now, Atlantis, we stayed there for 3 or 4 nights. It was very interesting and nice place, but it is away from everything. So it's designed almost like an all-inclusive where you almost don't leave. They want you to go to the restaurants there. They want you to do all of your entertainment there. They've got the casino. They've got the water park. But, once again, it's pretty expensive to leave there and to get a taxi going somewhere else.
So, Jamal, I wanted to go back to something that you mentioned earlier about we've only been on a cruise ship. And I think the cruise ship in the Caribbean experience is completely different from, and I'll say even completely different from our experience of a cruise ship in the Mediterranean. There, we felt like they gave you these really long days to go out on these excursions, and you had a really long time. So we also have done a cruise experience in the Caribbean. We've actually done 3, but the last one we did, we got to go to Jamaica, the Cayman Islands, and to Cozumel. And we, in that respect, we were a little bit disappointed because even in the Grand Cayman, for example, I think we got off the ship at like 8 or 8:30. It left at 2:30, which means you had to be back on the ship at 2. So I don't really know. Is it like because you can open the casinos and people can start gambling, or people just aren't interested in doing, or they don't feel like there's a lot of things to see? We could have spent a lot more time. And we literally on Grand Cayman, we packed as much as we could. We spent some time at the beach. We found a local place to have lunch. We went on a distillery tour. We raced back. I mean, we had a little bit longer in Mexico. And I think y'all talk a good bit about Mexico too, but that was our first time on Cozumel. We did have more of time there. We rented a car. We did enjoy the snorkeling. I think of all those places, funny enough, we enjoyed that the most because the other, we just felt rushed. The other experience was Jamaica, and you just don't have time. And then that cruise port is, the same as so many other ones, shops and things like that. So in that respect, I think we were a little bit disappointed. So just to let people know, if you are going to do a Caribbean cruise and think you're really going to get to see things, I think you'll find it to be a little disappointing compared to a Mediterranean cruise where we literally say it's like a hop on, hop off because you feel like you have been to those places. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Yeah.
Well, I'm really glad that you did, because that was actually one of our questions that we had, is if you would recommend going on cruises or solo. And I don't disagree with what you said about cruises. However, I will give the caveat, though, that if you know that going into it and you're going to islands where, okay, maybe the things to do are actually the stuff at port where you find a great excursion and you don't really want to spend a lot of time there, they can be very beneficial and nice for people. But if you want to enjoy it, be part of the culture, relax, snorkel more, you are right. You probably need to do it solo. Because when we did Virgin Islands solo, I mean, we were there a full week island hopping back and forth between St. Thomas and St. John. We didn't go to St. Croix, but we loved it. And it was a completely different experience than we've ever had when we were on the cruises.
Right. And I totally would agree with that. So I would say just take a look at that and then choose those excursions wisely to kind of see what you're interested in, right? So if you want to experience, something local, try and book early, like a cooking class or, something where you're spending time with a local person. And we just unfortunately didn't get that. So we were a little bit disappointed. The other 2 cruises that we've done were, like he mentioned, Bahamas, and, you don't really do a whole lot. So, yeah.
But there's a lot of people who just enjoy a cruise. Mm-hmm. And so Caribbean's great because it's close. You don't have that transatlantic flight that you have to worry about. You can get some really good deals on Caribbean cruises at times, especially if you are purchasing around this time of year during hurricane season. You can actually find some great deals on cruises. And trust me, the cruise lines aren't going to run their ships right into the middle of a hurricane. So I think you can be pretty safe on that. You may not end up going where you thought you were going to go because they will change their routes if there's a hurricane in the route at that time. They don't cancel the cruise. They just change the route and go somewhere else.
So you can get a surprise country. It's like, you never know what you're going to get.
The grab bag of cruises.
And I've mentioned this to people all the time. Sometimes the benefit of a cruise is the cruise itself, not even the destination. So I like how you had mentioned that. But since you confirmed the best way to go about it in the Caribbean is to do solo, you already kind of alluded to this, but it is relatively easy then to island hop from one place to the next, and flights, it seems, from the way I understood it from you, are relatively cheap to do it that way.
Yeah, I think that they really are. So you just kind of have to look to see what's available from the different places. But the bigger the airport, you're going to get some of those that go between them. And then, like we mentioned, from Aruba to Curacao to Bonaire, I think there was 2, but the one that we used was called Divvy Divvy Air. And it literally makes that triangle. It goes from one to the other and back again several times a day, but super inexpensive. And then, like I mentioned, the other one. So yeah, you could do that and definitely split your time between the different ones.
And there's also ferries that go between these islands as well. So if you don't want to do a little small island hopper plane, a lot of times you can take a ferry that goes between the islands.
And that's an experience in and of itself, too, to take the ferry.
Yeah,
it sure is. So I wanted to mention one other place. It's not somewhere I don't think that people think of as like, oh, I'm going to the Caribbean. This is where I'm going to go. But we really enjoyed it. High on our list is the country of Belize. So I don't know if you guys have been there.
We've been to Belize, ironically, on a cruise. But my sister has been to Belize outside of a cruise. And of course, Belize City, the capital, she said is like, whatever. But everywhere else in Belize, everybody that I know that's been there, including my sister, just raves about it, saying it's an amazing country.
Yeah, it really is. We super enjoyed it. The people were super friendly. So I will say we went there in 2021. So kind of as things were starting to open back up, and I think they were just really thankful to like have us there and, have us visiting and spending money and things like that. But we really enjoyed that. We did stay on an island. Well, we did some things in the jungle for a couple of days and went to some of the Mayan ruins. We went to Yucatunich. But we spent the rest of our time on Ambergris Key, and there's a town there called San Pedro, did a food tour, super laid back. There's no cars on that island. I mean, like delivery trucks and stuff like that. But if you want one, like it's golf carts. We did a whole day excursion out to the Great Blue Hole. And we actually snorkeled it. It was snorkelers and mostly divers. But we got to snorkel the rim of it with a guy and stopped a couple of other places. So I think a lot of people don't think of that when they think of the Caribbean or, people go to Mexico. We absolutely loved it. So I would say put that on your list. We didn't end up going to Belize City either, but we would go back in a heartbeat and go to some of the other towns along the beach side as well, and even go and explore up, more in the jungle, because that was just super relaxing. So put that on your list too, if people haven't been. That we loved it.
Well, I love how you said that, because when you think of the Caribbean, you probably think of islands. And yes, Belize is not an island. It's in Central America, but it's right on the Caribbean Sea. So you get the vibes. But would you put that in the top 3 places for first-time Caribbean travelers to go? And if not, what are in your top 3?
From ease of travel and the people, yes, Belize is super easy to travel to. So if you're a first-time traveler, I think it's a great place. Now, like you said, there's some question about whether it's considered Caribbean or not. And even if you Google it, there's lots of debates over whether it's Caribbean or Central America. And so, just keep that in mind. But as far as the people, we have some great stories about being in Belize and like things that you probably wouldn't have let people do for you in the U.S. It just seemed natural in Belize. Like we were trying to pay the guy for this excursion that we were going on. And like he came into the bank and stood beside me at the ATM. And he wasn't being rude or anything. He was just there to help if necessary. But we said, if someone did that to you in the U.S., you would be clocking them upside the head, get away from me.
Or most other countries, you'd be like really freaked out. So anyway, it was, like we just felt like people went out of their way to like try to help you and, make your experience. Yeah, because we have another story. He left his phone in a taxi as we were trying to leave, and like literally they came running back, bringing it. So I just feel like they went out of their way. So that really was easy. You fly in and out of Belize City. You can take a ferry over to some of those islands. I mean, you can rent a car. It's also fairly inexpensive. The other place that we stayed up in the jungle, they were like, listen, I got to come pick you up and take you back. And it was like way cheaper than we could even rent a car for, And so we've actually recommended it to several people recently who haven't, including our daughter and son-in-law, who are trying to come up with somewhere to go and they haven't traveled a lot on their own. We said, oh, this would be a great place to go. So you said, where else would be good for first-timers?
Yeah, just two more quick off the top. I mean, Curacao was easy to get to and was easy to navigate around. So I would put that there. And
I definitely think the Virgin Islands. That is because of not even having to have a passport, like that barrier to entry for people who want to start trying to explore new places, but don't want to have that hassle and that expense or whatever. I mean, that's a great place to go to.
But definitely, like I said, Puerto Rico, way underrated. And, I didn't grow up around anyone from Puerto Rico, and so didn't hear a lot about Puerto Rico growing up. So it just wasn't a place that was top of our destination list. And like I said, we really have a newfound love for Puerto Rico.
Yeah. Let me add to that expense-wise. So if somebody wants to look for a place that would be the most budget-friendly or more budget-friendly, I think would be Curacao and Belize. Curacao was far cheaper than Aruba. Now, we had gotten a special deal on our room in Aruba, but we stayed in a really cute, like a boutique hotel that was almost like an efficiency. But our whole stay, which I think was 3 or 4 nights, was less than 1 night would have cost in Aruba. So looking at those kind of things too.
I have a quick question, selfishly. I went on a Caribbean cruise to Turks and Caicos, and I loved it. Didn't see much, but we did a catamaran tour and then had all the rum punch we could drink and the snorkeling, and it was so fun. I want to see more of Turks and Caicos. Have you two been there? Anything you would recommend if you have?
We have not. So Turks and Caicos is on our list. St. Kitts is on our list. I would love, because we will probably go back to St. John just because we just love it so much. I think we would try to pair it with a trip to the British Virgin Islands because it's so close as well. I'm trying to think. There's so many, right? That's the thing. We've barely scratched the surface. There are so many islands, but that is on the top of our list.
What about Dominican Republic?
We have not been to the Dominican Republic. I think, and especially here recently, places like Jamaica, Dominican Republic, I don't know that I could enjoy getting out because they have had all these safety warnings, right? We're not super big all-inclusive people. We like to go out and see the island. They've had a lot of safety warnings, even in the Bahamas recently, Dominican Republic, Jamaica. People do it. I know people road trip Jamaica, and there's amazing things I see in Jamaica. I just don't know if I had to worry the whole time, right, and be nervous, if I could enjoy it that much.
That might be a good one to do a cruise for. And that's where I went on my cruise, those 2 stops. And in Dominican, we went to this little monkey sanctuary with these tiny little monkeys jumping all over you. And we did this nature tour where you go down these natural waterfalls. And you're with guides, of course. So that adds the safety and protection factor in there. So,
yeah. I mean, I think all-inclusive in one of those places is fine too. And you can do excursions through the all-inclusive, so you can do some of those same things. But like Melissa said, we're just not all-inclusive people just because we like to get out and get off the beaten path.
Yeah. And I think those other places we talked about, Turks and Caicos, St. Kitts, St. Lucia. Oh, St. Lucia is definitely, and my sister has been and just loved it. I think some of those, though, are higher on the list that we would put ahead of those, so.
St. Lucia had a real moment this last summer. Everyone was going there.
Yes. Yeah.
I thought you were going to say just this past week because they won their first ever Olympic medal. So
yes. In track and field, she won. So yes.
The year of St. Lucia.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, but it absolutely looks beautiful. And we've seen some different shows about it and seen people go. So that is also high on our list. So I just think that taking all those things into account, we would visit those other places before. And we kind of thought we would like to do, there's this one cruise itinerary that goes to a lot of those places. But then just after our experience, I think we would just be like, oh, well, we spend 12 days and we didn't really get to see those places. So I think we'll try to prioritize some or long weekend trips or something to go and visit some of those places.
Do you have any trips to the Caribbean currently booked for the future?
We do not.
We do not. We have trips booked, but we're not going to the Caribbean. One of the things about us is, and we talk about this on our show, is that while we have our youth and our health, we've said we want to go as far as we can. And so a lot of our travel experiences are traveling transatlantic or in that direction. But we do try to work in like these Caribbean trips because being in Florida, it's easy to do just as kind of filler trips for us.
But we will say we also are not where we plan trips like way out in advance. It was last fall, I think September, we booked that trip and stayed in Atlanta, so went to the Bahamas, and then right after that went on that cruise. But we booked both of those in September. So you never know with us.
I like that. That's more my travel style too.
You guys had kind of touched on weather earlier, and you kind of mentioned hurricane season. But when would you say is the best time to travel to the Caribbean?
Like that May to July time frame is probably the best. Hurricane season was a little bit early this year, and so usually August is a decent time, but we've been in November going into December, and just depending on where you're at in the Caribbean, the waters may be nice and, warm, but you do run the risk of you're right at the end of hurricane season, and so it could have cooler waters going through there.
I think Aruba, though, if you're talking about Belize, Aruba, and Curacao, you're pretty good to go anytime because of how much further south that is.
Yeah, close waiter.
Right. We were in both of those places this year in March, and it was fantastic. So, yeah, that would be a place that you could go then. I will tell you, when we were in St. John last year in May, our son and daughter-in-law actually went to St. John for their honeymoon. And so when we were there, I actually talked to the guy and was talking about, that was October, right? So hope they're not going to run into hurricane season. And he said, if you try to avoid September is historically their worst time. That was what he said. And they were fine. Like they had a great trip in October. But again, you never know, right? So I think trip insurance probably for a Caribbean trip where they get hit by hurricanes is going to be your best bet for hurricane season.
Well, I know you have episodes on your show about all of these Caribbean destinations that you've been to, all of these transatlantic trips that you're taking. So let's talk a little bit about Sunshine Travelers and how you really got started, because I'm always fascinated with what inspires someone to get on the mic and start telling their stories.
Well, it was that trip that we took where we went for 6 weeks to Europe. And because we got to see and do so many amazing things, and we posted all of that onto social media, and then as we would continue to travel after that and post stuff, people started coming to us and said, hey, we're thinking about going so-and-so. Have you ever been there? Do you have any recommendations? Or we would hear people say, we wish we could travel like you guys do, but we wouldn't even know where to start. Like, do you use a travel agent? They were asking us all these questions. And then there's a third group that said, you know what? I don't care anything in the world about traveling. We'll let you guys do all of it, but we love living vicariously through you. And we just put those groups of people together in our heads, and we were like, we should do a podcast or something, a blog where we start capturing all of this so that we can share it with people. And that's really how it was born.
Yeah, and I would also add, so we started doing the podcast in April of 2023. And so right before that, we had some really great trips planned. So early in 2023, we went to the Galapagos Islands. We were going to go to London, and then we had trips to St. John and Puerto Rico planned. So we had like all these things planned. And so we were like, this would just be a great time, right? We could start sharing these things and start figuring out this whole process of doing the podcast. So that was really when we decided to say, okay, we're going to commit to this. If we do this, we're going to do an episode. So we do an episode every single Tuesday. And a lot of them are destinations. We, of course, have guests. We like to interview people who have been to places that we are planning to go to get more information. And we thought, well, instead of just talking to people and getting these recommendations, let's get them on the podcast and just start talking about it. We did that with Aruba, for example, and got some really great tips, and other places that we've been, and then just topics that we're interested in. Things that we have found helpful for us, like how do we deal with jet lag? How do we pack? Like For example, that 6-week trip to Europe, we did use e-bag backpack. So it's a little bit bigger backpack, but we each had that one backpack because we didn't want to, one backpack for 6 weeks. And, so how we did that is because we had these ferries, we had all these planes, we just didn't want to have to worry about
wash clothes along the way.
Yeah. Wow. And so some, just some things I think that people ask us, well, how do you do this? And then what do you recommend? Especially things like, am I going to need converters for, the plugs? And what do you recommend? And what do you use? I mean, still, like even this weekend, just sharing that information is a lot of fun.
So one of our trips that we've got coming up is we're doing a safari in Kenya. And this coming weekend, we're actually interviewing the owner of the safari company. And so we're going to talk about what we can expect on the trip. And we like to do that. We'll interview somebody. So take Aruba, for example. We interviewed somebody who's gone to Aruba a dozen times. They love Aruba. So before we went on our trip, we interviewed them. We talked about what are the things that we should do, where should we stay, and asked all those questions. And then after we got back, we gave our experience and what we would recommend and what we would do.
There's always learnings from your trips, and those are those valuable little tiny things that you're not going to find on Google or in a lot of blogs that might be outdated.
Yeah, and that's so true. And I think in the past, before we started doing this, you don't ever want to look at a trip and really say, oh, well, we messed up this. We should have done this differently, because you really do enjoy the experience. Like whatever happened, right? Like nothing was catastrophic or whatever. But I think it also has changed our perspective to where we can really analyze it and say, hey, we could have done this better, but now let's share it with somebody else. Like, here's a different way, or here's what we would do differently. And I think that's valuable information.
Yeah. When we talk with people, they're always saying like they love our honest opinion, because people sometimes just write about the highlights, but they don't talk about what you would do different or how you would change things. So I think that's really important for people to hear, to really understand what the experience is like or what you're going to get out of it, and to see if it's a good fit for them or their trip.
Yeah.
I can give you a great example of that. Our episode that just came out today, we're talking about the Greek islands, and Santorini is one of them, right? And if you've ever researched pictures from Santorini, they're gorgeous, of these sunsets and the white buildings and the cliffs, all that stuff, right? But when you're there and you realize that there's 1,000 people trying to get that exact same photo at the same time, and they're like 5, 6, 7, 8 rows deep trying to get that photo, that's a whole different experience. And we think people should know that. Yes, it is a gorgeous place, but if you're thinking you're just going to stroll down around sunset and take this gorgeous picture, you're going to be sorely surprised.
Right. Or like when you get off on the ferry and it's like herding cattle because you're at sea level, but you really got to climb the cliff, and no one realizes that you got to climb the hill to get up there and do that. And we haven't been, but from Kim's experience, from Kim's experience telling us about it and everything that we've read. And so I really love that. And that's one of the great things about travel podcasts, yours, ours, everybody's, is that you can sometimes delve into those things that aren't going to make it in just a general review when you do a quick Google search. It's going to get you to the nitty gritty of the real experience, the good and the bad, so they know what to expect.
Right. And I think the other thing too is, instead of just reading it, and I get people like to see that. I like to skim things too and make lists and things like that. But when you're telling these stories and telling these experiences, and here's what you need to do differently, I think the story is so much part of it, but then the inflection that you have in your voice and, that kind of thing that you can really share, and that passion, right, that you can really share. And we have said this so many times, if nothing else, if nobody ever listens, this stuff is recorded, like for our kids and our grandkids and these experiences, because we enjoy hearing those experiences from like his dad or, people who are good storytellers and things like that. So those things are recorded. But I think that is a big part of it for people who listen to podcasts, who are into podcasts, who want that advice. You get a lot more emotion from it than just reading a blog post.
Mm-hmm. And you are making an impact on the audience, because you all were recently a finalist for the Travel Podcast Award at TBEX, right? Congrats on that. That's huge.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, that was exciting. I mean, we've only been doing this for a year now, and so it was really an honor to kind of be in the same grouping as like Chris Christensen, the traveler, right? Who's been doing this since 2005, has millions of downloads. So it's an honor to be considered in that same group.
And you guys know this too, because y'all have been doing this for a while and, people will ask you questions and come to you. And it's really neat when people do start coming to you or saying, oh, I saw that you posted this, or I listened to your podcast episode and we took your advice and we changed something about our trip. And we hope that it makes that better, because we have done things like in the Amalfi Coast, for example, we decided to use points and stay in Naples instead of taking Rick Steves' advice and staying in Sorrento. So I think that's what we hope to just be able to help people. We like to say, help people travel more and better.
And oh, by the way, take Rick Steves' advice. He was right.
Sometimes you have to learn it on your own.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, your podcast covers so much. You guys have interviews, you have destinations, you have different topics that you talk about. But what is something special that your audience can expect from you and receive from your podcast? What sets your podcast apart from other travel podcasts?
We talked a little bit about it, but it's just our authentic experiences. And if we like something, we're going to tell you we like it. If we don't, we're going to say we would have done it differently. And so you can expect that from us. But then also, we're going to take you to some off the beaten path places. The example being Aruba is we didn't go there to just hang out at the beach, right? We wanted to find out, what does Aruba have to offer other than just nice sandy beaches? It does have a lot, but most people don't find that because they never travel outside that little hotel zone.
Yeah. So I just think the local experiences, because we really do try to seek those out. And then also, of course, those stories, but then learning from local people. And then we just like to share those stories.
And what would you say top 3 episodes that new listeners should listen to first?
Well, the most popular ones are always about the Caribbean. So our most popular and downloaded episodes are about St. John and Aruba, and now the Amalfi Coast. So I would say that those 3 very popular destinations. But then I would say some other ones are how to create, or it's about creating a travel bucket list. It's about packing. I think the way that you pack makes your trip more enjoyable. If you literally have all this stuff, it's just miserable to get it there. And people talk about baggage fees, and we still end up taking too much stuff, right? So packing more efficiently. So we have quite a few episodes that are really just tactical about traveling, which I think that's a skill too. And I don't think we realized that. I had a post recently and somebody said, oh, well, get out of practice, or people who don't travel much, they take too much stuff because they don't have practice. But we found that after the pandemic, like our first couple of trips after the pandemic, we were like, what is wrong with us?
I forgot one of those converters when I went to Greece, and it was my first international after the pandemic.
Yeah. And so I think that's true. So I think just trying to learn as much as you can. I think that's why we've put those episodes, because there are practical things, right? There's these enjoyable, and there's a lot that goes into it, but you have to have those practical things too. Oh, and we have one about jet lag. I'm not sure if I mentioned that because I think jet lag is a big thing. So we sort of have a process that we do. So we have an episode about jet lag that I think is very helpful.
I would say start with the travel bucket list, because that really tells you, where were we at when we started this? It was our very first episode, so it kind of gives you that mindset of where we were when we said we're going to go and do this podcast.
And I would say, if people are interested in traveling to Europe, we do have a lot of episodes about Europe. So that would be helpful. The Mediterranean cruise, that 6-week trip, Italy, Ireland, Scotland,
France.
We have one on Paris that we just did recently, because we had a lot of people saying, hey, we're going to go to Paris, either after the Olympics or for the Olympics. And we were like, well, we've never spent a lot of time there, but we can tell you a 1 to 2 day itinerary of, here's the highlights of what you should hit while you're there.
Yeah. Okay. And then the other part of that, I'm not sure which episode, I think it's in like the Mediterranean cruise, one of the 6-week cruise. So we have been to the coast. So Marseille, Aix-en-Provence, Nice, Monaco, that area.
I'll be listening.
And as we're starting to wrap things up here, guys, tell our audience where they can find your show, travel resources, and anything else you want to tease to our audience about you guys.
So podcast, you can basically find wherever you listen to podcasts. So just search for Sunshine Travelers Podcast, Apple, Spotify. They're streamed on YouTube, not video, but just audio. And then anywhere else that there are podcasts. Our website is sunshinetravelers.com. The podcast is also there. You can listen to it. Find travel resources, experience. So we actually have links for like every single tour that we've done. We usually book those like on Viator, but every tour that we've done, I try to link those just because we do talk about them. And then just lots of other resources, things that we have found helpful over the years.
And that's Travelers with 1L. So if you've got anyone outside the US that's listening, we've had to explain that a few times that we spell it with 1L.
Yes. And then Instagram and other social media, we are Sunshine Travelers Podcast with 1L.
Squatties, definitely go over to the website because you have put so much time and energy into creating resources. You have itineraries on there, and I've been scoping out your website quite a bit, and it's super helpful.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that. We do. We have put some itineraries out there, especially for the road trip ones. I mean, everything like from, where we stayed and tours that we booked. And it's nice because Scott has organized them to where you can edit them for your information and then just have like a day by day for people who like that.
Yeah, and I would say join our mailing list because we put a lot of stuff for free to the people who are on our mailing list. And so a lot of those resources, we'll distribute them through that way from time to time.
You have a subscriber out of me.
Yeah, and just go to the website and you get our free ultimate packing list when you subscribe. So you get a freebie right away. So that's just on most of the pages on the website.
I love it. Well, we really appreciate having you guys on. It was a pleasure. And thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. It's always a pleasure to talk to you guys.
You're welcome back anytime.
Sounds great.
Thanks so much for tuning in to this week's episode. Keep the adventures going with us on all the socials at Travel Squad Podcast. Tag us in your adventures and send us in your questions of the week.
If you found the information in this episode to be useful, or if you thought we were just plain funny, please be sure to share it with a friend that would enjoy it too. And as always, please subscribe, rate and review our podcast, and tune in every Travel Tuesday for new episodes.
Stay tuned for next week's episode. We have some more amazing adventures and tips in store for you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, Squatties.